Welcome to Veterans Discuss the Burns of War. It is our hope that this show gives civilians an increased awareness of the sacrifices that our military personnel have made. We also hope that the courage that it takes for these veterans to share their stories will inspire more service members and veterans to speak about their experiences and struggles and to ask for help when they need it. On today's show, I'll be speaking with Mr. Bob Ward, who served in the artillery in Vietnam, and Mr. Irwin Kaplan, who served in military intelligence during World War II. Please be aware that some of the details discussed on this episode may be of a graphic nature. Joining us first is Mr. Bob Ward. Bob, thank you for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me here.
I'm glad you were able to come.
Great.
So do you want to start off by just giving us a little bit of background about yourself and your military experience?
Yeah, I was a draftee, and I had just finished college and graduated from Florida State. Went home and was getting ready to go to officers training school through an ROTC program that Florida State had in September, and I got drafted in August. And I think my mistake was I was curious and went down to the court, and they said, raise your right hand, and then they said, we all did that. Then they said, go get on the bus. You're going to Georgia.
Dude, I'm sure you weren't expecting that.
No, but I did what I was told. Mm-hmm. And I called my parents and said, I'm on my way to Georgia.
Were they shocked?
You know, my parents were World War II. They were involved in World War II.
Okay.
And I think they realized that stuff happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so you served in Vietnam for how long?
I was there for a year.
Okay. And do you want to give us any background about that? Any details about that experience serving in Vietnam?
Yeah, when I got drafted, they looked at our records and they realized that you know, I would have qualified for OCS, but OCS was full, and they found they realized that they were short of NCOs, so they created a instant NCO school, 90 days. I was in 8 months. I was in E5.
Oh, that was quick.
And I was trained as a section leader, which meant I would be in a battery, and I had a 13 guys to man a 105 howitzer, which we supported the infantry with. And there were 6 guns in the battery. So I was third of the 82nd Artillery Americal Division, and I was a section chief.
Okay.
So, and then from there, I started getting some crap because I was only in the service for a year, and they gave me some of the kids that were there that were corporals had been in the Army 5 years, and were waiting to make sergeants. So they started giving me some crap, and I had to challenge one guy to go out back. And then what happened was they got...
Because you had moved up in rank so quickly.
Yeah, I was an instant. And I certainly didn't have the experience any of these kids had. So I ended up... I think the command section of the battery said, well, we got to do something to maintain order here. And so they sent me out to the field to be with a lieutenant and a radio operator, and I was part of a forward observer team. And I did that for 8 months.
Okay. And you were telling me that there was one battle that was particularly significant that you were involved in?
Yeah, this was very close to Khao Ma, and it was, I was in the northern section of Vietnam, and it was a mountainous area. And we inserted there and then ran into what we thought was, and what turned out to be, a North Vietnamese battalion. And we had 2 very heavy days of fighting, or 3. And, you know, I saw some young kids, and you get shot and die. The second day, we were taking a lot of casualties, and I don't think I moved the whole time I was in the foxhole. And at one point, we had brought in air support, and we had shelled the crap out of the place, and we even had some really large guns come in and support us. And a lot of these guys were just living underground and shooting at us, sticking their gun out and stuff like that. And I don't know what made me do it, but maybe it was the casualties we were taking. And as a little kid, I played guns, and I was pretty good at it. I could hide, and I could charge, and anyway, at that point, I decided I didn't want to get hit in a foxhole and maybe get evacuated, maybe not. So I decided to move, and I went forward. And I got a lot of supporting fire from the guys, and we started making headway, which was really cool. And we eventually, with the support of all of our air and ground support, we drove those guys out of there.
Wow.
And we took it. And it was good. And then they, I was very close to, I went back to Battery, and of course, the jobs that I had back in Battery were given to other people, which was fine. And I was just waiting to get extracted to go home. And that was, we did our big thing in March. In June, they got rid of me. And I went back and stayed in California for a while and got released the end of July.
And your big thing, meaning this battle that you were discussing, is part of the big thing that you were talking about, referring to?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I had picked up a couple of shrapnel wounds, and they said, go get in the helicopter. I looked at the helicopter and started over there, and I saw green traces going after it. And I just said, I'm not doing this. I was afraid the helicopter would get shot down.
Right.
And so I went back and they put me to work. And my wounds were just flesh. I don't know why they even sent me to get rid of me. Maybe they didn't like me, I don't know. Yeah.
I would bet it's more than that. But so when we discuss, when I mentioned the burdens of war, it sounds like one of the biggest burdens is seeing other people get killed.
I mean, I was an old guy. I was at that time I was 25, and I got drafted at 23. So what's so funny is when I was in basic training, I asked the first sergeant if I could see the captain, because I got my notice. My parents sent me my notice down to report to officers training school in San Antonio, Texas. And he said, yeah, go see the captain. It's fine. And I went there, and he fell off his chair laughing and said, get out of here, you bozo, before I throw you in the brig.
What?
I showed him my report date, and
Yeah.
he said he wanted nothing to do with that. And it was fine. I went back, and because I had ROTC experience in high school and in college, they gave me a platoon. I was very fortunate. I never cut a lawn. I never washed a dish. I never did KP. I was always in charge of like a platoon of new guys.
Okay.
And basically the same thing happened when I went to AIT, and they gave me the artillery. They assigned me there.
So earlier when you were talking about the younger guys who were killed, I could tell that was very difficult for you.
It's my reflection. And you know, it's really hard to. It's so hard to fathom these kids not enjoying life like I have.
And when that comes up, so when you think about it, how do you cope with those thoughts, all those obviously powerful feelings that you have?
You're part of the responsibility, and then he is. I do a lot of volunteer work.
Okay. Do you want to say more about your dog?
Yeah, he's a dude. Yeah, it was slick. I think he's just resting. Not you. You are, right? You put up with a lot. Cool.
So Bosco's helped you a lot.
Yes, he has.
Yeah.
I'm dedicated to him. He's dedicated to me.
Yeah. And I think you said volunteering as well.
Yeah, and he's interesting because he came from Guiding Eyes for the Blind in New York. And he was one of their studs, and my family has been involved in Guiding Eyes, volunteering, raising their dogs to be guides for 30 years. Mm-hmm. And
that's amazing.
I had 4 years prior to my getting him, I had buried my last guide, who was a stud and got retired at 9, and he lived to be 16. And because he wasn't able to function, I put him down. And it took me 4 years to get over him, and my wife was good enough to pick him up on our way home from Rhode Island. We lived in New York at the time. And I asked her to, I called Guiding Eyes, and they said, yeah, we've got this big guy who's a stud, and we need to find a home for him. And you want to try him out? And I said, sure. And I tried him out. And it was like, when I opened the door, when she brought him home, it was like, he doesn't talk, but I know he said, Bob, where have you been? Oh. Right, cool guy?
It was a perfect match.
He's a great, loving animal. And he's got a service dog vest on, but he's a therapy dog.
Yeah. Yep. And so we're just about out of time. If there's one or two things anything that you would want to say to other...
I'd like to thank the VA for everything they have done. They've provided almost everything that I need.
Oh, that's great.
Yep. And they've just a great organization, and I hope all the vets get the same treatment I got. And I still get it. Last year they replaced my knee. It was great.
And how about a message for veterans or service members who might be watching?
Thank you guys for doing what you do to keep America great.
That's wonderful. Okay. Well, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. And thanks for putting up with me.
You were fantastic. That was perfect. Joining us next is Mr. Irwin Kaplan. Irwin, thanks for being here today.
Yes, you're welcome.
So do you want to give us a little description about yourself and your military experiences?
Yeah, I started Providence College when I was, I just turned 16, and I got into PC, and just about that time they drafted everybody out of the college. So
what year was this?
Well, I can't remember now. It's so far back.
Yeah.
Anyway, they drafted us all into the Army, and they sent us on to different bases, and then we finally got on board a ship, and they took us to Hawaii because they had to pick up some men there, and from there we went on to Japan, you know. Mm-hmm. And once we got to Japan, they put me in a truck with another guy, and they wouldn't tell us where we were going. So they took us to a small colony of men. There were 35 men in this company, and it was a military intelligence company. and they told us we were going to be assigned to some people, and we were going to be given orders to go out and do things and not to tell anybody what we were doing.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, well, the thing that I remember is they sent us up to northern Japan, Amori Bay, way up north, you know, and that's where there was a building up there that the soldiers, the Japanese soldiers, were sending Morse code to the American soldiers and giving them the wrong information. Mm-hmm. So we were told to go in and take them out, you know. And the captain had a machine gun, I had my regular gun, and the Nisian had his gun. And we approached the building. We got over there. We had to go by boat to, through Amori Bay to get there. And once we got there, we were approaching the building, and a guy jumped out of a tree and grabbed me on the ground and started stabbing me. He wanted to get my gun. Mm. And I couldn't do anything because he was leaning on my legs, and I couldn't move. But I had another gun in my sock, so I went to grab that. And another guy grabbed me from behind, and he took the gun out of my hand. He started smashing my hand against the ground, you know. Oh, wow. So I couldn't do anything.
Yeah. Well, both your hands were.
Yeah, and the captain heard what was going on, and he came running over because the guy that took my gun stood up and turned around and faced me, and he was going to shoot me with my own gun.
Wow.
So he had a machine gun, and he blew the two guys away. Now, by then, the men in the building heard what was going on, so they were going to come out and see what was happening. Mm-hmm. And as they were coming out, he was blowing them away with the machine gun. Mm. Meanwhile, I was laying there, and they had to take off my shirt and stop the bleeding, you know. And they called
both hands were bleeding?
Yeah.
Okay.
They called for a helicopter, and they took me by helicopter to we hadn't taken over Tokyo yet, you know. So they took me to a field hospital outside of Tokyo, and they sutured me up, and they did the best they could. And they said, we're going to wait till you'll have to stay here until we take over Tokyo so we can get you to the hospital there, you know. And that's exactly what happened, you know. We were there, I guess I was there about 6 months. And then they finally...
Pretty significant.
Yeah, and they finally got us and sent us to the hospital. And we were... You know, they did another job on my hand. You can see my hand is, it's really bad.
The wrist.
Yeah. And I can't do much with it, you know. And it's just too bad because otherwise I'm very healthy. And I just turned 91.
I know, I was amazed. Yeah. I didn't know. I would never have guessed 91.
And I feel this is the only thing I have. And, you know, when I go to the hospital in Providence, and get some work done, when I go down the corridors, I get sick to my stomach. When I see some of the fellas with no legs, no arms, and I keep looking at my hands, you know, and I say, gee, am I lucky, you know? I'm very, very lucky, really.
Yeah, you really are.
I think God was with me when all this happened, you know?
Yeah. And thankfully the captain was nearby as well.
Yeah. And he was a great guy, you know. And we used to keep in touch with each other once I got discharged. And he was out before me, you know. Okay. And then finally he passed away. And his wife called me and told me that this happened. And I went down to Philadelphia to go to the funeral. And I felt bad because he was a great guy, you know.
And he saved your life.
He saved my life. Yeah, right. So... other than that, I think the only thing that bothers me is what I mentioned to you when we got to Guadalcanal, the bodies were all in the water. And they were taking the dog tags and trying to, you know, find out who these people were, you know. And anyway,
the guys that you were with were taking the dog tags? To maintain the dog tags?
No, we were just, they left the front of the boat off and we was told to go on land, you know, and see if we could take over some of the property that the previous group had taken over, you know, because they're going to go on, you know. And the only thing that bothers me, as I mentioned to you, sometimes at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the morning, I'll wake up and my hands are going like crazy and there's bodies all over me, you know, because when we got in the water, all the bodies were still there, They were trying to get them out, but they were trying to get the dog tags first to see if they could find out who they were, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
So it feels like you're actually, so in your nightmare, it feels like you're actually back there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how have you coped? So that sounds horrendous. How have you coped with
Well,
those
it doesn't
nightmares?
happen that often, you know?
Did it happen more often?
At the beginning,
at the
it did,
beginning,
yeah. And as time was going on, it was less and less. And I notice now it's a while before that happens again. But once it happens, I don't realize what's going on, you know. And I start feeling for the bodies, you know. And it was awful because these guys were anywhere from 17 to 21, 22 years old, and they didn't stand a chance. The minute they let the front of the boats down, the Japanese gunned them all down, you know.
And you were saying there was quite a lot killed almost instantly.
There were 3,000 of them were killed out of 10,000 guys, you know. And they were, when they were told to get on land as quickly as they could, and some of the guys had they had what do you call it? What do you call the things you have in your hand and you can throw them and they blow up?
Grenades.
The grenades, yeah. And those fellas were told to swim as quickly, you know, as quickly as they could, because they got underneath the Japanese enclave. They had these cement enclaves with an opening in the front, and if you got underneath, the guys were throwing grenades in there and blowing them all up, and they had to keep going all the way down the line until they could get them all, you know.
Wow.
So that was really something to see.
Yeah. So how have you coped with the nightmares? It sounds like, one, just over time it's gotten better. Is there anything else that's helped to decrease the nightmares?
The only problem I have is with my hands, you know. And the veterans have been trying to do something for me, and there's not much they can do, you know.
The veterans at the VA or where?
The VA, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I've been up there a number of times, and they gave me physical therapy and occupational therapy and everything they could do. They did a lot for me, you know. But they actually told me there's nothing they can do with this. Even if they operated on it, there's nothing they can do. And they said they could probably take a lot of this bone out, but they're not sure after they do that whether I'd be able to use my fingers or not, you know?
Yeah, you don't want that.
So after all, I'm 91. I figure I'll let it go and live the rest of my life with this, you know?
Well, it doesn't slow you down much, right? I mean, I know you drive.
Yeah, what happened was one day I was sitting before two of the guys in the VA, and one of the fellas said to me, Doc, I was a doctor at one time, you know?
Oh,
yeah.
I didn't know that. Okay.
And he said, Doc, he says, we're going to buy you a car, you know? And, you know, I looked at him, I said, what is he, crazy or what, you know? And he says, you know, he says, you can't function with the front, with the wheel. You can't do anything with it. So we've got to get you a car so we can put a little wheel on there that you'll be able to move, right? Now the seat belt, I had to go down to the chief of police down in Kingston because I can't do anything with the seat belt. I can't pull it towards me, you know?
Oh, I see.
And the captain that I saw was funny because he says, are you pregnant?
Because that's what people would typically tell him.
Yeah,
Okay, yep.
they're pregnant, they can't get the seatbelt.
Right.
So he was funny,
Yeah.
but he told me to go back to the hospital, and I got a letter from Dr. Quigley, who's the orthopedic surgeon, and he says, I want you to keep this in your glove compartment and give a copy to the chief of police, you know. And he said that way they'll tell the officers that are on duty not to bother me because they got the number of my car and they've got the, you know, the idea of what's happening, and I can't use a seatbelt, so they might see that right away, you know.
I see, yeah.
Yeah. And other than that, I've been able to get around, and I'm still driving the same car.
That's great. You have a nice car too. So, so do you have any advice for any veterans or service members who might be watching that might be struggling or hesitant to go to the VA or?
Well, you know, I can actually tell you that the VA has done an awful lot for me. I need a Kleenex if you can.
I'm not sure if I. So we have about a minute left.
My nose is running.
Oh, actually, I do have one.
Okay.
Sure.
That's good. My nose is running while I'm talking. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, the only thing I feel very strongly about is, you know, I've talked to some veterans, and some of them are not too happy the way they were treated. You know, I mean, I don't know what the circumstances were or anything, but anytime I talk to them, I tell them, you can't beat these people. They know how to handle you. They'll do all they can for you. And that's what they've done for me. And I really appreciate the fact that everything has been going good for me, because I had it's funny because I was a doctor, and Dr. Who was my primary care physician. And when I'd go in to see him, we'd sit down and he'd look at me and say, Doc, what can you do for me today? Can you give me an antibiotic or something? You're going to do something for me. Instead of me.
Right.
He was a great guy.
Yeah,
you know?
that's good.
We had a lot of fun together, you know.
Yeah.
But he was very good to me, and he ordered the medications that I needed. And now there's a new doctor that just took over, this Dr. Patel, and he's a young doctor and very, very nice. I mean, he went through everything.
Dr. Patel, yep.
Yeah, and he asked me to have some X-rays taken, and I had them taken, and there isn't much they can do, but they can see what this, you know, what this looks like, you know.
Great. So, and we have about 30 seconds left. Any final thoughts that you want to make sure to share, or?
Well, you know, I just feel bad for some of the younger guys, because they have no idea what we went through. None whatsoever. That you talk to any of the younger fellas, and they don't even know what happened in Japan or Germany or you know, Vietnam. They have absolutely no idea.
And why do you think that is?
And well, I feel because they just didn't know. Nobody ever told them anything. Nobody ever taught them anything in school about some of these things. And I just feel that the younger guys should go into the service for a couple of years and learn what it is to be in the service, even though there's no, you know, no fighting going on right now. And but that's my feeling. Okay. I really can talk to a lot of the younger guys in school, you know, and URI and Brown and the different colleges, you know, and they don't have any feeling as to what happened. They'll look at me if I tell them I was injured in my hand. Oh, really? You know, they don't know, and it's too bad, because they really should go into the service for 2 years and get an idea of what it's like.
Like they do in Israel, where it's mandatory.
Right. Yeah. Mandatory. Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate you being on for today. Your story is fascinating. Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah,
I appreciate it.
I enjoyed it.
Okay, great.
Really.
Thank you.
And it's very nice meeting you too, Stan, you know, really.
Nice meeting you.
Yeah.
Thank you for tuning in today's show. We hope that you enjoyed it. Please remember, you are never alone. If you are a service member or veteran in crisis, or you are concerned about one, please call the 24-hour crisis hotline at 800-273-TALK and press 1. If you would like to learn ways that you could provide more support to the service members or veterans in your life, please visit the Be There website on the screen. That's all that we have for today. Please join us again next month for a new episode of Veterans Discuss the Burdens of War.